Blob for Nintendo tells the story of, you guessed it, a boy and his blob. After all, what kid wouldn't want his very own shape-shifting pet blob? A Boy and His Blob was released in 1989 and created by David Crane. If that name sounds familiar, it's because Crane was responsible for numerous successful hits like Kaboom, Laser Blast, and the mega hit Pitfall on Atari 2600. However, he did assist with some clunkers like Ghostbusters on Commodore 64. Here's a fun fact. Did you know that David Crane, the same guy who created Pitfall, was a programmer for the infamous and controversial Sega CD cult classic Night Trap? Hard to believe, huh? A Boy and His Blob was David's first game for the Nintendo Entertainment System. You start out on a warm summer night in the middle of New York City with your trusty blob at your side. And is that the World Trade Center in the background? According to the manual, the blob's full name is Blobber. He has traveled to Earth from Blobolonia to find someone to help him defeat an evil emperor who has enslaved his home planet and forces everyone to eat chocolate and marshmallows. This whole thing kind of sounds like a public service announcement from the American Dental Association. And it gets better. To defeat the evil emperor, the boy and his blob will need a goodly supply of vitamins, and to get the vitamins, they'll need money. To get the money, they'll search the underground caverns for hidden treasures and diamond stones. Sounds like a reasonable business plan. The mission for the first part of the game is to maneuver through the subway tunnels and caverns beneath the streets in search of treasure. What better message to send to little kids than to go running into the subway by yourself at night? Quite frankly, the blob doesn't even look like he wants to go in the subway. Look at him shaking his head. Nuh-uh, nope. The controls are a little wonky. For starters, you cannot jump. Let me reiterate that, jumping is not allowed. None. If you're used to platformers like Mario or Mega Man, this will feel a little off, and it honestly took me a while to get used to it. Instead, the B button whistles for the blob to come to you, and the A button throws Blob a jelly bean. Blob turns into all sorts of different objects along the way to help out. But the game doesn't outright tell you which jelly beans cause which effect. This is a guess and check situation. Some are a little straightforward, such as the punch jelly bean, which turns Blob into a hole. Get it? Hole punch? Apple turns him into a jack. Some aren't as apparent though. For example, licorice turns him into a ladder, vanilla turns him into an umbrella, and cola turns you into a bubble boy for some whitewater rafting. You basically just have to write these down as you go. You can scroll through your inventory of jelly beans with the select button. One thing that is a little tedious is that you can't just simply bring up a menu of jelly beans. You can only scroll through them one at a time by hitting the select button. So if you go too fast and miss the one you want, you've got to keep hitting select until you loop around again. That gets old pretty fast. Since the boy can't jump, the game mostly entails puzzle solving and figuring out which jelly bean to feed the blob in a given situation. Some of Blob's powers also have multiple functions, such as the umbrella, which slows your descent on a long fall, and it can also act as a barrier against falling objects. This game isn't terrible or anything, and the puzzle solving aspects can actually be pretty addictive, but the game's definitely not without its faults. For starters, I hope you like that music because it's the same track looped over and over and over again. Also, when you control the boy, it's very loose. Instead of a dedicated run button, he actually seems to just pick up speed as you walk to the left or right for an extended period of time. And you, the player, have no control over this. Then he skids wildly to a stop when you try to slow down. This and the loose hit detection can make it a little awkward to get around what should otherwise be easily passable enemies. Speaking of enemies, there are only a couple in this first section. These bouncing snake things, this empty spiderweb, not much going on here. The game is definitely more puzzle than action. On top of that, players might get frustrated at some of the blind jumps and leaps of faith. It's not always apparent where to go when you're trying to reach the next section, and if you use the hole in the wrong spot, you'll plummet to your untimely demise. The game only gives you 5 lives and no continues. It's a lot of memorization and writing down your own maps as you guess and check your way through the game. The book gives you a few clues. For example, if you get too far away from Blob, he might not be able to follow you. However, a cryptic message in the manual hints that you may be able to make him catch up. Throw a ketchup jelly bean and he'll instantly catch up with your character. Ironically, the manual also points out that Blob detests ketchup-flavored jelly beans, and if he ate one, he'd become petrified. Eventually, after you collect enough treasures, you can go back up to the street and rob the vitamin shop. Then feed Blob a root beer jelly bean and he turns into a rocket so you can travel with him back to his home planet. That last sentence sounds just as ridiculous speaking it as it did when I first wrote it. I definitely never got this far as a kid. Much to my surprise, when you get to the Blob's homeworld, there's actual enemies and some side-scrolling action. There's falling popcorn, cherry bombs, and oversized sweet teeth, among other things. And if you feed the Blob an orange jelly bean, he turns into a Vita Blaster so you can blast your enemies with, you know, vitamins? Yeah, take that, you bastards. Pew, 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 pew. These levels are the closest thing to action you're gonna get, but unfortunately the helter-skelter play control rears its ugly head again. Dodging these falling items should be pretty straightforward, but it's actually a little tenuous with your characters skidding all over the place. After fighting through literally only like 7 or 8 screens, you get to a locked door and you have to feed Blob a lime jelly bean to turn him into a key. Get it? Key lime? The final boss is waiting for you on the other side, and look at this guy. It looks like the unholy love child of Jabba the Hutt and a Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. He just sits there too, motionless, taking it all in. For no reason whatsoever, as soon as you walk in the room, Blob is imprisoned in a cage in the middle of the screen. This part of the game is unnecessarily cryptic. Would you guess that you're supposed to feed Blob an apple jelly bean so that he turns into a jack, thus knocking over the bottle of vitamins onto the Emperor? And if the vitamins were the one thing that could kill this guy, why would he keep a large bottle of them positioned precariously over his head? The frustrating part about this is that you can't just toss the jelly bean directly into the Blob's mouth. For some reason there was a block in the way, so you have to sort of run back and forth, get some momentum, and then toss it in there. Come on! Get in there! Come on! Finally! You knock over the bottle, the vitamins destroy the Emperor, and you get to be the big hero on Blobolonia. Game over. That's it, too. No big epic end scene or fanfare. Just the satisfaction of a job well done. Yay! Well, that's A Boy and His Blob for you. It's not a terrible game by any means, but probably not one that has a lot of replay value. I enjoyed the game for what it was, and the puzzle elements make for an interesting quest, but the awkward play control and the aimless exploring could be a turnoff for casual players. The game did spawn a sequel for Game Boy in 1991, as well as a somewhat successful remake for the Wii in 2009. I wouldn't exactly call this an epic video game franchise, but it's certainly worthy of a look if you're in the mood for something different. That wraps it up for this edition of Blast Backwards. What did you think of A Boy and His Blob? Did you play this game as a kid? Did you go back and play the remake? Don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and you can subscribe for more. You can check out all of my gaming videos over at fridaynightarcade.com. Thanks for watching, everybody, and thank you for your support.